She had a rare seizure in front of me. I had the only existing vial of the antidote, imported for my own terminal condition. I didn't hesitate. That $2 million decision would cost me everything and reveal exactly who my daughter-in-law really was. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. The August heat in Scottsdale was brutal, even at 7 in the evening. I was sitting in the guest house kitchen, preparing my weekly medication, when I heard Vanessa screaming from the main house. Not her usual theatrical screaming. Something different, something primal. I grabbed my emergency kit, the small leather case I kept with me at all times, and ran across the courtyard. The stones burned through my thin sandals. My heart pounded against my ribs, already strained from the Fabry disease that had been slowly destroying my organs for the past 8 years. The sliding glass door was open. Vanessa was on the floor of the living room, convulsing. Her body arched and twisted against the imported Italian tiles. Foam gathered at the corners of her mouth. Her eyes had rolled back, showing only white. Tyler stood frozen by the kitchen island, phone in his hand, staring at his wife like she was a stranger. "Call 911, I shouted, dropping to my knees beside Vanessa. I did. They said 15 minutes. There's a pileup on the freeway. 15 minutes. In 15 minutes, Vanessa could be dead or brain damaged from oxygen deprivation. I opened my emergency kit. My hands moved on autopilot, decades of nursing training taking over. I tilted her head to clear her airway. I checked her pulse, racing, erratic. The seizure showed no signs of stopping. The small medical alert bracelet on her wrist. I'd never noticed it before. Vanessa wore so much jewelry that one more piece blended in. The inscription read, "Epilepsy, severe. Diazepam allergy, requires specialized intervention." I didn't know Vanessa had epilepsy. In 3 years on this property, I had never heard about this condition. But what froze my blood was the second line. Emergency antidote, Vilaxirin. The same medication in my emergency kit. The only medication that could save my life during a Fabry crisis. $2 million per dose. One laboratory in Switzerland produced it, and they had stopped manufacturing 6 months ago. I had one vial left, one single vial, imported at extraordinary expense, meant to keep me alive for another 6 weeks until my doctor could find an alternative treatment. If I used it on Vanessa, I would have nothing. Tyler was still on the phone, repeating our address to the dispatcher. Vanessa's seizure intensified. Her skin was turning blue. I didn't think. I couldn't think. I pulled the vial from my kit. The glass was cool against my palm, deceptively light for something worth more than most houses. I loaded it into the injector pen and pressed the needle against Vanessa's thigh. The mechanism clicked. The medication disappeared into her bloodstream. The vial, now empty, slipped from my fingers and rolled across the terracotta floor. Vanessa's seizure began to slow. Her breathing evened out. The blue tinge faded from her lips, replaced by a healthier pink. I sat back on my heels, watching my daughter-in-law's chest rise and fall with steady breaths. I had saved her life. I had also signed my own death warrant. Tyler dropped to his knees beside us, finally unfrozen. "Is she okay? What did you do?" "She had a severe epileptic seizure. I gave her the emergency medication." "Thank God." He grabbed Vanessa's hand, pressing it against his face. "Thank God you were here, Mom." I didn't answer. I was staring at the empty vial on the floor, calculating how many weeks I had left to live. Vanessa's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, she looked confused, disoriented. Her gaze moved from Tyler's tearful face to the high ceiling of the living room to my kneeling form beside her. Then her expression changed. The softness disappeared, replaced by something hard and cold. Her lip curled. She pushed herself up on her elbows and looked at the injector pen still in my hand. "What did you do to me?" Her voice was hoarse, but the accusation was clear. "You had a seizure," I said calmly. "I administered emergency medication." "Medication?" Vanessa's eyes went to the empty vial on the floor. Recognition flickered across her face. She knew exactly what Vilaxirin was. "You injected me with something. Did you try to poison me?" "What?" Tyler looked between us, confused. Mom just saved your life. Vanessa sat up fully, brushing off Tyler's helping hands. I wake up on the floor with your mother holding a needle, and I'm supposed to believe she was helping me. Call security, now. Vanessa, that's insane. Call security! Her scream echoed through the vast living room. This woman tried to kill me. I want her out of this house. I want her arrested. I stayed very still, watching Vanessa's performance, because that's what it was. I recognized the calculation behind her hysteria, the way her eyes checked to make sure Tyler was watching before she let the tears fall. 40 years as a nurse, I knew when someone was acting. Tyler, my beautiful, naive son, pulled out his phone again. I'm calling the police. Tyler, I said quietly. The medication I used was my own. It's the only treatment for my Fabry disease. I gave your wife the last dose I had. He paused, looking at me. What do you mean the last dose? I mean I have nothing left. The manufacturer stopped production. What I just gave Vanessa was supposed to keep me alive for the next 6 weeks while my doctors searched for alternatives. Vanessa's face went through several expressions. Surprise, calculation, something that might have been fear. Then she rearranged her features into righteous indignation. She's lying. She's always lying. Always playing the victim. I'm the one who almost died. Not the regular front door. The service entrance. The one that led directly to the helicopter pad on the north side of the property. Tyler's head snapped up. That must be your father. Richard Whitmore. Vanessa's father. The pharmaceutical billionaire who had built his empire from nothing, starting as a sales rep in Detroit and ending up as CEO of Whitmore Pharmaceuticals. I had met Richard twice before, at the wedding, where he looked through me like I was furniture. At Christmas 2 years ago, where he spent the meal on his phone. What I remembered most were his eyes. Cold, assessing, always calculating. Footsteps echoed through the hallway. Richard appeared in the doorway, flanked by 2 men in dark suits. He took in the scene with one sweep. Vanessa on the floor, disheveled. Tyler hovering uncertainly. Me, kneeling with the injector pen. And on the floor between us, the empty vial. Richard's smile died on his face. He crossed the room in 3 strides and picked up the vial. I watched him read the label, watched him recognize what he was holding. Where did this come from? His voice was quiet, controlled, but there was something underneath. Something that made his security detail shift uneasily. She tried to poison me, Vanessa said, scrambling to her feet. Daddy? She injected me with something while I was unconscious. Call the police. Have her arrested. Richard didn't look at his daughter. He was staring at me, at the injector pen in my hand. Mrs. Palmer, he said, did you inject my daughter with this medication? Do you understand what this medication is? It's Valaxiren. It's the only treatment for my terminal condition. It costs $2 million per dose, and the manufacturer stopped production 6 months ago. I met his gaze steadily. Your daughter was having a seizure. I used the only medication that could save her. Richard's jaw tightened. Vanessa moved toward her father, reaching for his arm. Daddy, she's lying. She's always been jealous of me, always trying to turn Tyler against me. Richard raised his hand. The gesture was small, almost imperceptible, but Vanessa stopped mid-sentence as if she'd been slapped. Everyone out, Richard said. His voice was soft, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. Now, Tyler hesitated. Dad, I don't think... The security team moved immediately, ushering Tyler toward the door. Vanessa stood frozen, her face pale, something like fear flickering in her eyes. You too, Richard said to his daughter. Vanessa left. The door closed behind her. Richard and I were alone in the vast living room, the empty vial still in his hand. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked at me. You gave my daughter the only medication keeping you alive, he said. It wasn't a question. She's been cruel to you. I've seen the way she treats you when she thinks no one is watching. I didn't respond. It was true, and we both knew it. Richard turned the vial over in his fingers again, his expression unreadable. Do you know how I built my company, Mrs. Palmer? I started with nothing. My father drank himself to death when I was 17. I put myself through college selling vacuum cleaners. Everything I have, I earned. He set the vial on the coffee table between us. My daughter has never earned anything in her life. She's never known what it means to sacrifice. I gave her everything, and in return, she became exactly what I despised. A spoiled, entitled woman who thinks the world owes her something. I stayed silent, unsure where this was going. What you did tonight, Richard said slowly, was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the most foolish. You gave up your life for someone who doesn't deserve it, who would never do the same for you. I didn't think about deserving, I said. I just saw someone who needed help. Richard looked at me for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the professional mask, revealing something almost human underneath. I'm going to find out exactly what happened here tonight, he said. Every detail, every moment. And depending on what I discover, Mrs. Palmer, things are going to change. He walked to the door, then paused. How long do you have? Without the medication? My doctor says 6 weeks, maybe 8 if I'm careful. Richard nodded once, his face giving nothing away. I sat alone in the living room. The Arizona sunset blazed through the windows, painting everything in shades of gold and red. 6 weeks, maybe 8. The empty vial sat on the coffee table, catching the light like a tiny glass coffin. I had saved Vanessa's life, and in doing so, I had ended my own. But the way Richard had looked at me, the way he had silenced his daughter, told me that this story was far from over. Something was happening. Something I didn't understand yet. The hospital room was cold and sterile, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you feel like you're already dead. I had been admitted 3 days after the incident, when my body finally began to fail without the Vilaxarin. Amara Okonkwo stood at the foot of my bed, her face grave. She was my specialist, the woman who had been managing my Fabry disease for the past 5 years, Nigerian-born, Harvard-trained, and one of the best in the country. 6 weeks, she said, flipping through my chart. That's the optimistic estimate. Without the Vilaxarin, your kidneys will begin to fail, then your heart, then everything else. Betty, what you did was extraordinarily selfless, but it was also... She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Is there any alternative? Any other treatment? Okonkwo set down the chart. There's an experimental therapy being developed in Germany. It's not approved yet, and the waiting list is over 2 years. I've contacted every specialist I know, every pharmaceutical company, every research facility. The Vilaxarin you gave away was quite literally the last dose in existence. I closed my eyes. I had known this, of course. I had known it when I pressed that needle against Vanessa's thigh. There's something else, Dr. Okonkwo said. Her voice had changed, becoming harder, more clinical. I ran some additional tests when you were admitted. Blood work, urine analysis, the standard panel. She pulled a paper from my file and handed it to me. Numbers and abbreviations that would have meant nothing to most people, but I had been a nurse for 40 years. I understood immediately. My Vilaxarin levels are too low, I said slowly. Much too low for someone who is taking regular doses. Yes, according to your prescription records, you should have had significantly more medication in your system. But these numbers suggest you were receiving perhaps 60% of your prescribed dose. I stared at the paper. 60%. For how long? I've been feeling worse for months, I said. I thought it was just the disease progressing. It wasn't. Dr. Okonkwo's jaw tightened. Someone has been diluting your medication, Betty, or replacing it with a partial dose. The vial you gave your daughter-in-law may have been tampered with as well. The implications hit me like a physical blow. If my medication had been diluted, then I had been slowly poisoned for months. My condition had been deliberately worsened. And the person who had access to my medication... Who fills your prescriptions? Dr. Okonkwo asked. I do, myself. I pick them up from the pharmacy and... I stopped. That's not true anymore. Vanessa offered to help, about 6 months ago. She said it was too far for me to drive, that she didn't mind picking up my medications when she was in town. 6 months, the same time frame Dr. Okonkwo's tests suggested. Betty, the doctor's voice was gentle but firm. I think you need to contact the authorities. I shook my head. I don't have proof, just numbers on a page. The numbers are proof, combined with testimony about who had access to your medication. My daughter-in-law is a Whitmore. Her father could buy and sell this entire hospital. Do you really think the police are going to investigate based on some blood work? Okonkwo was silent. We both knew I was right. I need time, I said. I need to understand what's happening before I do anything. The door opened. A nurse poked her head in, looking apologetic. Mrs. Palmer? You have a visitor. He says it's urgent. I expected Tyler, maybe even Vanessa, coming to finish what she'd started. Instead, Richard Whitmore walked into my hospital room. He was dressed in a charcoal suit, no tie, looking more like a man on his way to a casual business meeting than someone visiting a dying woman in a hospital. His security detail stayed outside the door. Okonkwo, he said, nodding at my physician. I need a moment alone with Mrs. Palmer. Whitmore, my patient is in serious condition. I'm aware. I'm also aware that I may be the only person capable of helping her. Please. Okonkwo looked at me. I nodded. She gathered her files and left, closing the door behind her. Richard pulled a chair close to my bed and sat down. Up close, I could see the lines around his eyes, the tension in his jaw. He looked tired in a way that expensive suits and private helicopters couldn't hide. I've been doing some investigating, he said without preamble, since that night at your son's house. Investigating what? Everything. The medication. My daughter. Your relationship with Tyler. The financial arrangements of your family. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hospital air conditioning. Why? Richard leaned back in his chair. Because something didn't add up. A woman gives up the only thing keeping her alive to save someone who treats her like garbage? Either you're a saint, or there's something else going on. Maybe I'm just a mother who saw someone dying. Maybe. But saints don't usually have enemies who are slowly poisoning them. Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. He set it on my bedside table. I have resources most people can only dream of. Private investigators, forensic accountants, access to security systems that my daughter doesn't know I control. He tapped the folder. In this file, you'll find evidence that Vanessa has been systematically diluting your medication for the past 7 months. My heart was pounding. How? She didn't pick up your prescriptions herself. She sent her assistant. The assistant brought them to Vanessa, who opened the sealed vials, extracted approximately 40% of the contents, and replaced them with saline solution. She then resealed the vials using equipment purchased online. I couldn't breathe. 7 months. For 7 months, Vanessa had been slowly killing me. Why? The word came out as a whisper. Richard's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Shame, perhaps, or anger. Because of money. Because of what happens when you die. He opened the folder and showed me a document. Legal papers, dense with terminology. Your husband left you everything when he passed. The house you sold to pay for his medical bills, the life insurance, and a trust fund worth approximately $400,000, which you transferred to Tyler when he married Vanessa. I wanted to help them get started, buy their house. I know, but here's what you don't know. Tyler signed a postnuptial agreement 2 years ago giving Vanessa control of all marital assets in the event of his death. And 6 months ago, he signed another document, power of attorney, giving Vanessa control of his affairs while he's traveling for work. I stared at the papers. I don't understand. What does this have to do with me? Your trust fund wasn't empty when you transferred it to Tyler. There was a clause, a provision that your husband added before he died. If Tyler dies without children, the remaining funds revert to you. If you die first, they become part of Tyler's estate, which Vanessa controls. The pieces began to fall into place. Horrible, sickening pieces. She was killing me for $400,000? For that, and for more. There's also a life insurance policy that Tyler took out on you 3 years ago. $500,000. Vanessa is the beneficiary. I thought I might vomit. My own son had taken out life insurance on me and his wife was poisoning me to collect. Does Tyler know? I asked. About the medication? About what she's been doing? Richard's face hardened. I don't know. I'd like to believe my daughter acted alone, that your son is simply a fool who married the wrong woman, but I can't be certain. He closed the folder. What I am certain of is this. My daughter has become something I despise. Something I swore my children would never become. A parasite who feeds on others, who takes without earning, who destroys without conscience. What are you going to do? Richard looked at me for a long moment. His eyes were the same cold, calculating eyes I remembered from our first meeting. But there was something else there now. Resolution. I'm going to find out exactly how deep this goes. I'm going to discover whether your son was complicit or merely blind. And then I'm going to make things right. By doing what I should have done years ago. By cutting off the disease before it spreads further. He stood up. You have my word, Mrs. Palmer. Whatever my daughter has done, she will answer for it. And if there's any way to save your life, I will find it. He walked to the door, then paused. The security cameras at Tyler's house. I have access to all of them. I've been reviewing the footage from the night of Vanessa's seizure. I saw my daughter go into the bathroom 30 minutes before her episode. I saw her take something from a bottle she'd hidden in the cabinet. 15 minutes later, she walked into the living room and collapsed. The blood drained from my face. She induced her own seizure? It appears so. The pills she took were likely a medication that triggers epileptic episodes in sensitive individuals. She knew exactly what would happen. She knew you would try to help her. And she knew what that help would cost you. Richard opened the door. My daughter tried to kill you, Mrs. Palmer. First slowly, with the diluted medication. Then quickly, by forcing you to give up your last dose. I intend to make certain she never has the opportunity to hurt anyone again. I lay in my hospital bed, surrounded by machines that measured my failing organs, and tried to comprehend what I had just learned. My daughter-in-law had been poisoning me for 7 months. She had deliberately triggered a seizure to make me waste my last medication. She had probably hoped I would refuse to help, giving her ammunition to turn Tyler against me. But when I saved her life instead, she had turned that into another weapon, accusing me of trying to kill her. And somewhere in this nightmare, my son had either been complicit or completely blind to his wife's true nature. The folder Richard had left sat on my bedside table. Evidence of everything. Proof that I wasn't paranoid. That I wasn't imagining the hostility and cruelty that had been directed at me for years. But proof wasn't enough. Not with 6 weeks to live. I needed to know the truth about Tyler. I needed to know if my son had betrayed me, or if he was simply another victim of the woman he'd married. And I needed to decide what I was going to do with whatever time I had left. Richard Whitmore's office was on the 40th floor of a glass tower in downtown Phoenix. The view stretched for miles. Desert and mountains and endless blue sky. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. I had been released from the hospital 2 days earlier, against medical advice. Okonkwo had argued, pleaded, even threatened to have me committed for psychiatric evaluation. But I was lucid and legally competent, and I had signed the discharge papers with a steady hand. I had things to do before I died, and I wasn't going to do them from a hospital bed. Richard's assistant had picked me up from the guest house that morning in a black sedan with tinted windows. Tyler and Vanessa were in Los Angeles for what Vanessa called a wellness retreat, though Richard's investigators had discovered it was actually a consultation with a divorce attorney. Vanessa was planning to leave my son, take his money, his house, and his dignity, and walk away to find her next victim. The office door opened. Richard entered, followed by 2 people I didn't recognize, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes, and a younger man carrying a leather briefcase. Mrs. Palmer, Richard gestured to the chairs arranged around a conference table. This is Elena Vasquez, my head of corporate security, and David Chen, my lead forensic investigator. I took my seat, trying to ignore the way my hands trembled. The Fabry disease was progressing faster than Dr. Okonkwo had predicted. Without the Valaxirin, my body was beginning to consume itself. We've completed our investigation, Richard said, settling into his chair. I wanted you to hear the results directly. Elena Vasquez opened a laptop and turned it to face me. On the screen was a photograph of Vanessa, looking glamorous in a red dress at some charity event. Your daughter-in-law has been running a long-term con, Elena said. Her voice was matter-of-fact, almost clinical. Based on our findings, this isn't the first time. She clicked to the next image. A younger Vanessa, maybe 25, standing next to an elderly man in a wheelchair. Gerald Hoffman, 82 years old, wealthy widower, no children. Vanessa met him at a golf club in Scottsdale 4 years before she married your son. She became his caregiver, then his fiancé. He died 6 months into their engagement. Natural causes, according to the death certificate. But when we pulled his medical records, we found something interesting. Another click. A document filled with numbers. Hoffman was taking medication for his heart condition. In the months before his death, his prescription was being filled regularly, but the levels in his blood work were consistently low. Just like yours, Mrs. Palmer. I felt sick. She killed him. We believe so. Hoffman left Vanessa $300,000 in his will. She used that money to reinvent herself, attend the right parties, meet the right people. Elena's expression hardened. Meet your son. David Chen opened his briefcase and removed a stack of papers. We also found evidence of financial manipulation, he said. Over the past 2 years, Vanessa has moved approximately $400,000 out of accounts shared with Tyler. The money was transferred through a series of shell companies and eventually deposited in an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. 400,000, I repeated. That's exactly what I gave them for the house. Yes. She's been systematically stealing back the money you contributed to their marriage. David spread the papers across the table. There's more. We found communications between Vanessa and an attorney specializing in estate planning. She was working on a strategy to have Tyler declared mentally incompetent. The plan, as far as we can determine, was to convince doctors that Tyler was suffering from early-onset dementia. Once she gained control of his affairs, she would have access to everything: his salary, his investments, any inheritance from you. Richard had been silent through all of this, his face carved from stone. Now he spoke. There's one more thing you need to see. He nodded at Elena. She clicked to another file. A video, security camera footage. The timestamp showed it was from 3 weeks ago. The location was the main house. The kitchen. In the video, Vanessa was alone. She took a small bottle from her purse and carefully measured liquid into a glass. Then she opened the refrigerator and retrieved a pitcher. The same pitcher I used for my morning juice. She poured the contents of the glass into the pitcher and stirred. We tested samples from your guest house, Elena said. The pitcher contained traces of a compound that accelerates kidney failure. Combined with the diluted valaxerin, it would have killed you within weeks. I watched my daughter-in-law poison my food with the same calm efficiency she used to arrange flowers. Does Tyler know? My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. About any of this? Elena and David exchanged a look. It was Richard who answered. We don't believe Tyler was directly involved in the poisoning or the financial theft. But Mrs. Palmer? He's not innocent either. He pulled another document from the stack. 3 years ago, Tyler applied for a life insurance policy on you. The application lists your Fabry disease as a known condition. The policy pays out $500,000 on your death, with Vanessa as the beneficiary. I know. You told me about this before. What I didn't tell you is that Tyler was the one who suggested moving you to the guest house. The recommendation came from Vanessa, but Tyler presented it as his own idea. Richard's jaw tightened. He also signed documents giving Vanessa control of the household accounts, including the one that paid for your medication. He may not have known exactly what she was doing, but he created the conditions that allowed her to do it. I thought about my son, the boy I had raised, the man he had become. I remembered him as a child, holding my hand, looking up at me with complete trust. I remembered him as a teenager, sullen and difficult, but still my son. I remembered the day he told me he was marrying Vanessa, the pride in his voice, the way he looked at her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. Had that boy known what his wife was doing? Had that man allowed it to happen? There's something else, Richard said. His voice had changed, softer, almost reluctant. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device, a digital recorder. He set it on the table between us. My investigators placed listening devices in several locations. This conversation was recorded yesterday in the hotel room in Los Angeles. Vanessa's voice filled the room, clear and sharp. She's dying anyway, Tyler. The doctor said 6 weeks, maybe 8. Why are you so upset? Tyler's voice, muffled, uncertain. Because she's my mother. Because what I did was speed up the inevitable. She was sick before I ever met you. All I did was help nature along. Silence. Then Tyler again, barely audible. You promised you wouldn't hurt her. I promised I would take care of everything. And I have. When she dies, we get the insurance money and whatever's left of her trust. We can finally be free of this place. Start over somewhere new. She saved your life, Vanessa. She gave you her medication. A laugh, cold and cruel. She was supposed to let me die. That was the plan. If she'd just stood there and done nothing, I could have blamed her for it. Instead, the stupid woman had to play hero. God, Tyler, wake up. I've been planning this for years. Your mother was never going to accept me. She was never going to stop interfering. The only solution was to remove her from the equation. More silence. I could picture Tyler's face, the confusion, the dawning horror. You've been poisoning her. I've been managing the situation. There's a difference. She could have died. That was rather the point, darling. The recording ended. I sat in Richard Whitmore's office, surrounded by evidence of my daughter-in-law's crimes, and felt something inside me shift, the grief and confusion and desperate hope that maybe this was all a misunderstanding. All of it burned away, leaving only clarity. Vanessa had tried to kill me, deliberately, systematically, for money, and Tyler had known, maybe not everything, maybe not from the beginning, but he had known enough. He had heard his wife confess to murder, and his response had been to ask questions, not call the police. What happens now? I asked. Richard gathered the papers and photographs into a neat pile. Now we make a choice. I can turn all of this over to the authorities. Vanessa would be arrested for attempted murder, fraud, and theft. Tyler would likely face charges as an accessory after the fact. He paused. Or we can handle this privately. My way. I created this monster, Mrs. Palmer. I spoiled her, indulged her, protected her from every consequence of her actions. I thought I was being a good father. Instead, I raised a predator. His voice hardened. I intend to fix that mistake. Richard stood and walked to the window. The desert stretched out below, golden and harsh in the afternoon light. I'm going to take everything from her. Every dollar, every asset, every comfort. I'm going to cut her off completely and publicly. And then I'm going to make sure she can never hurt anyone again. He turned to face me. But I can only do this with your cooperation, Mrs. Palmer. I need you to be present when I confront her. I need the world to see what she did to you, and I need it to come from your own mouth. I thought about the years of cruelty, the poisoned medication, the carefully planned murder. I thought about my son, who had chosen his wife over his mother, and I thought about the 6 weeks I had left to live. The annual Whitmore Foundation Gala. 3 weeks from now, every business leader, politician, and journalist in the state will be there. Richard's smile was cold. By the time I'm finished, my daughter won't be able to get a table at a Denny's, let alone access to my fortune. I looked at the stack of evidence on the table. Proof of everything Vanessa had done. I'll be there, I said. I want to see her face when she loses everything. The law offices of Hartwell, Brennan & Associates occupied an entire floor of a historic building in Old Town Scottsdale. I sat in a conference room surrounded by lawyers, watching them dismantle my daughter-in-law's life, one document at a time. Richard had assembled a team of 12 attorneys, corporate specialists, criminal prosecutors who had left government work for private practice, estate planners, fraud investigators, an army of legal minds focused on a single target. The offshore accounts have been frozen, said Margaret Hartwell, the senior partner. She was 70 years old with silver hair and the demeanor of a retired general. Vanessa can't access any of the money she stole. We've also filed civil suits in 3 jurisdictions for fraud, theft, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. And the criminal charges? Richard asked. The district attorney is reviewing the evidence. Given the high-profile nature of the case and the strength of our documentation, I expect formal charges within the week. Attempted murder in the first degree, fraud, theft, conspiracy. I listened to them discuss my daughter-in-law's destruction with the same tone they might use to discuss a merger or acquisition. Calm, professional, methodical. Richard had spent 2 weeks preparing for this moment. He had cut off Vanessa's credit cards, frozen her trust fund, removed her from the board of the family foundation. Every privilege, every comfort, every advantage that came from being a Whitmore, gone. But the most devastating blow was still to come. "The gala is in 5 days, Richard said. "Is everything ready?" Margaret nodded. "The presentation is prepared. We have video evidence, audio recordings, financial documents, medical records. When you make your announcement, there won't be any room for doubt. Invitations have been sent to every major news outlet in the state. This will be the most covered society event of the year." She paused. "Are you certain you want to do this publicly? Once you expose your daughter, there's no taking it back." Richard's face was granite. "I raised a murderer. I protected her, enabled her, gave her every opportunity to become something better. Instead, she used my resources to destroy innocent people." He looked at me. "Mrs. Palmer nearly died because of my failure as a father. The least I can do is make certain everyone knows the truth." The meeting continued for another hour. Details were discussed, contingencies planned, legal strategies refined. Through it all, I sat quietly, watching the machinery of justice grind into motion. When the lawyers finally left, Richard and I remained alone in the conference room. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Tired." It was an understatement. The disease was advancing rapidly. I could feel it in my bones, in my failing kidneys, in the way my heart stuttered when I climbed stairs. "But I'll make it to the gala. I've spoken to my contacts in the medical community. There's a research group in Switzerland that's been working on an alternative to vilaxarin. It's experimental, not approved for human trials yet. But given your situation, they've agreed to provide compassionate access." I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. "You did that for me? It's the least I could do. You saved my daughter's life, even though she didn't deserve it. Even though she was actively trying to kill you." Richard's voice was heavy with something I hadn't expected: guilt. "I failed as a father. I created a monster. But I can still try to make things right." My phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. "Mom, we need to talk. Please call me." I stared at the message. In the 3 weeks since I'd been hospitalized, Tyler had called exactly twice. Both times, Vanessa had been in the background, coaching him on what to say. Both times, he had defended his wife, questioned my accusations, suggested that I was confused and paranoid. "He wants to talk," I said. Richard glanced at the phone. "Do you want to? I don't know what to say to him anymore. I don't know who he is." "He's still your son." "Is he?" I set the phone down. The Tyler I raised wouldn't have let this happen. He wouldn't have signed papers giving his wife control of my medication. He wouldn't have taken out life insurance on his dying mother. People change, especially when they're under the influence of someone like Vanessa. Richard's expression softened slightly. "I'm not excusing what he did. But I've seen my daughter manipulate people my entire life. She knows exactly which buttons to push, which weaknesses to exploit. Tyler may have been complicit, but he was also a victim. It matters if you want a relationship with your son after this is over." I thought about Tyler as a child, the way he used to crawl into my bed after nightmares, the way he hugged me when he left for college, promising to call every week, the way he looked at Vanessa on their wedding day, so full of hope and love. "I don't know if I can forgive him," I said. "You don't have to decide now, but Mrs. Palmer, Betty, whatever happens at the gala, you should know that Vanessa has been feeding Tyler lies for years. She told him you disapproved of him, that you thought he was a failure, that you resented his success. She isolated him from you deliberately so she could control him more easily." "How do you know this?" "Because she did the same thing to me." Richard's voice was bitter. "I haven't spoken to my son in 4 years. Vanessa convinced him that I was trying to control his life, that I disapproved of his choices, that I was manipulating him for my own benefit. She drove a wedge between us that I've never been able to remove. I hadn't known Richard had a son. He'd never mentioned family other than Vanessa. What happened to him? Marcus lives in London now. He runs a small tech company. We exchange emails occasionally, but nothing more. Richard looked out the window at the desert landscape. Vanessa destroyed my relationship with my son the same way she destroyed yours. She's a poison, Betty. Everything she touches, she corrupts. The phone buzzed again. Mom, please. I know you're angry. I know I messed up. But I love you, and I need to explain. I picked up the phone and typed a response. The Whitmore Foundation Gala. 5 days. We'll talk then. I hit send before I could change my mind. Richard raised an eyebrow. Interesting choice. If Tyler wants to explain himself, he can do it in public. He can stand beside his wife while the whole world learns what she is, and then he can decide which side he's on. It was cruel. I knew that. But I was dying and I was angry, and I had no patience left for half measures. Richard nodded slowly. That's fair. More fair than she deserves. We left the law office together. Richard's driver took me back to the guest house, past the main house where Tyler and Vanessa would return tomorrow from their wellness retreat, past the pool where Vanessa had sunbathed while I struggled to breathe, past the garden where I had planted flowers that would bloom long after I was gone. 5 days until the gala. 5 days until Vanessa lost everything. 5 days until I faced my son and demanded an answer to the question that had been haunting me since this nightmare began. The guest house was quiet when I arrived. I made tea with hands that shook from more than just the disease. I sat in my favorite chair, looking at photographs of Tyler as a child, gap-toothed smiles and skinned knees, and all the promise of a future that hadn't turned out the way I'd hoped. My phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Palmer? A woman's voice, unfamiliar. My name is Dr. Ingrid Hoffmann. I'm calling from the Zurich Institute for Rare Diseases. Richard Whitmore contacted us about your condition. Yes, he mentioned you were working on an alternative treatment. We are. And after reviewing your case, I wanted to speak with you directly. There was a pause. Mrs. Palmer, I don't want to give you false hope. Our treatment is experimental. It's never been tested on humans. There are significant risks. But if you're willing to try, we believe there's a chance, a real chance, that we can stabilize your condition, perhaps even reverse some of the damage. I closed my eyes. Hope. Dangerous, fragile hope. What would I need to do? Come to Zurich after your business in Arizona is concluded. We'll need to run tests, monitor your response carefully. It could take weeks, possibly months. And I have to be honest with you. Even if the treatment works, you may never fully recover. The damage from the diluted medication, the poison in your system, it's taken a toll. Yes, Mrs. Palmer, you'd be alive. I thanked her and ended the call. Outside my window, the Arizona sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple. 5 days until the gala, and then, maybe, a chance at a future I had given up on. But first, I had to watch Vanessa fall. The Whitmore Foundation Gala was held at the Arizona Biltmore, a Frank Lloyd Wright masterpiece nestled in the foothills of the Phoenix Mountain Preserve. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across a ballroom filled with 500 guests. Politicians, business leaders, celebrities, journalists, the elite of Arizona society, gathered to celebrate philanthropy and write tax-deductible checks. I arrived in a black dress that hung loose on my frame. I had lost 15 pounds in the past month, and the weight loss showed in my face, my arms, the way my bones pressed against my skin. I looked like what I was, a dying woman attending what might be her last public event. Richard met me at the entrance. He was impeccable in a custom tuxedo, but his eyes were hard. Tonight was the night he would destroy his own daughter. Are you ready? He asked. Once we start, there's no going back. The presentation will be broadcast live on the Foundation's social media channels. Every news outlet in the state has cameras here. By tomorrow morning, Vanessa's face will be on every screen in America. I looked across the ballroom to where Vanessa stood, radiant in an emerald gown, surrounded by admirers. She was laughing at something, throwing her head back in that practiced way of hers. the picture of sophisticated charm. Tyler stood beside her, uncomfortable in his tuxedo, scanning the crowd. When his eyes found mine, he froze. I held his gaze for a moment, then looked away. "Let's do this," I said. The dinner was interminable. 5 courses of food I couldn't taste, accompanied by speeches I couldn't hear over the pounding of my heart. Vanessa sat at the head table with her father, performing the role of devoted daughter, occasionally casting glances my way that dripped with barely concealed contempt. She had no idea what was coming. Richard had kept the plan secret from everyone. Vanessa thought this was just another gala, another opportunity to network and charm and solidify her position in society. At 9 o'clock, Richard took the stage. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he said, his voice carrying easily across the ballroom. "The Whitmore Foundation has been my life's work for 30 years. We've funded hospitals, schools, research facilities across this state. We've helped thousands of families build better lives. But tonight I need to address something personal, something I've hidden for too long." Richard paused, letting the silence build. "I need to talk about my daughter." Vanessa's smile faltered. Across the table, I watched her posture stiffen. For years, I believed I was raising a successful, accomplished woman, a philanthropist, a leader. I was proud of her. Richard's voice hardened. I was wrong. The murmur that rippled through the ballroom was like wind through leaves. Vanessa's face had gone pale. "Daddy?" she said, her voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "What are you doing?" Richard ignored her. 6 weeks ago, my daughter committed a crime. Not her first, as I would later discover, but certainly her most brazen. He gestured to the large screen behind him. "The evidence I'm about to show you was gathered by private investigators and verified by independent experts. What you are about to see is not speculation. It is documented fact." The first image appeared on the screen. Security camera footage of Vanessa entering a bathroom, taking pills from a hidden bottle. "This is my daughter, 15 minutes before she had what appeared to be an epileptic seizure. Watch what she does." The video played. Vanessa swallowing the pills. Vanessa checking her reflection. Vanessa walking calmly to the living room, waiting for the drugs to take effect. "She induced her own seizure," Richard said, deliberately, knowing that her mother-in-law, Betty Palmer, would try to save her. Knowing that Betty had only 1 dose of medication left, medication worth $2 million, medication that was keeping Betty alive. The ballroom was silent. Every eye moved between the screen and Vanessa, who had risen from her chair, her face a mask of shock and denial. "This is a lie," she said. "Daddy, what are you—" "My daughter wanted Betty to use that medication," Richard continued, his voice cutting through her protests. "She wanted Betty to sacrifice her only chance at survival. And when Betty did exactly that, when she chose to save Vanessa's life at the cost of her own, my daughter accused her of attempted murder." Another image appeared, the police report Vanessa had filed, the accusations, the demands for investigation, but that wasn't the beginning of Vanessa's crimes, just the most recent. The presentation continued, evidence of the diluted medication, bank records showing the stolen money, documents from the offshore accounts, the audio recording of Vanessa confessing to Tyler that she had been planning Betty's death for years. With each revelation, Vanessa's composure cracked further. She looked around the ballroom, searching for allies, for support, for anyone who might believe her. But the faces staring back showed only horror and disgust. "I also have evidence linking my daughter to the death of Gerald Hoffman," Richard said, "a man she was engaged to 4 years before marrying Tyler Palmer, a man whose medication was diluted in exactly the same way Betty's was, a man who died 6 months after making Vanessa his heir." "This is insane!" She pushed back from the table, nearly knocking over her chair. "These are lies! Fabrications! Daddy, how could you do this to me?" "I'm doing this because I created you," Richard said quietly. The microphone carried his words to every corner of the room. "I spoiled you. I protected you from consequences. I gave you everything you wanted and never taught you to earn anything for yourself. This is my fault, Vanessa. All of it. And this is me finally taking responsibility." Vanessa turned to Tyler. "Tell them. Tell them this is all lies. Tell them I would never. Tyler stepped away from her. I heard you, he said. His voice was barely audible, but in the silent ballroom, everyone heard. In Los Angeles. I heard you say you'd been planning Mom's death for years. I heard you laugh about her saving your life. I heard everything. Tyler, baby, You told me she was paranoid, that she was confused, that the disease was affecting her mind. Tyler's voice cracked. And I believed you. I believed you over my own mother. He turned to me. Across the distance of the ballroom, I saw tears on my son's face. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what she was doing. I didn't respond. I couldn't. There was too much pain, too much betrayal, too many years of damage to process in a single moment. Vanessa made a break for the exit. 2 security guards blocked her path. Vanessa Whitmore, one of them said, "You're under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, and theft. You have the right to remain silent." "You can't do this!" Vanessa screamed as they handcuffed her. "I'm Richard Whitmore's daughter. Do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," Richard said. "And so does everyone in this room. So does everyone watching online. By tomorrow morning, so will the entire country." They led Vanessa away, still screaming, still protesting. The emerald gown dragged along the ballroom floor, gathering dust and shame. I sat in my chair, watching my daughter-in-law's world collapse. 500 people had witnessed her destruction. Millions more would see the footage in the days to come. Tyler approached me slowly, hesitantly, like a man walking toward a bomb that might explode at any moment. I looked up at my son. He was crying openly now, his face twisted with grief and guilt. "I should have listened to you. I should have trusted you. Instead, I let her convince me that you were the problem, that you were trying to control my life, that you were jealous of our happiness." He dropped to his knees beside my chair. "I took out life insurance on you because she said it was responsible planning. I signed those documents because she said it would help with the household finances. I never knew. I never imagined. I don't know if I can forgive you, Tyler. I don't know if I can trust you again. You chose her over me. Again and again, you chose her. Even when you knew something was wrong, you chose to believe her lies over my truth. But you're still my son, and you were manipulated by someone who's very good at manipulation. So I'm not going to cut you out of my life." I reached out and touched his face. "My child. My boy. The only family I had left. We'll figure this out, eventually. But it's going to take time." Tyler grabbed my hand and pressed it to his cheek, sobbing. Richard appeared beside us. "The police have taken Vanessa into custody. My lawyers will ensure she's prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." He paused. "Betty, there's a car waiting to take you to the airport. Hoffman's team is expecting you in Zurich tomorrow." I looked at the empty chair where Vanessa had sat, at the screen still displaying evidence of her crimes, at my son, kneeling at my feet, begging for forgiveness he hadn't yet earned. "Thank you," I said to Richard, "for everything. Don't thank me. This was the least I could do." He helped me to my feet. "Go to Zurich. Get the treatment. And when you're well enough, come back. There's going to be a trial. And I want you to be there when my daughter is sentenced." Tyler stood. "Can I come with you? To Zurich?" I thought about it. About the son who had failed me. About the chance to rebuild something from the wreckage. "Not yet," I said. "But soon, when I'm ready." I walked out of the Arizona Biltmore, leaving behind the gala, the cameras, the whispers. Behind me, my son watched me go, finally understanding the cost of the choices he had made. Ahead of me, a plane waited to take me to a place where I might live. I had survived Vanessa Whitmore. Now it was time to survive the disease she had weaponized against me. 8 months later, I sat in a Zurich courtroom via video link, watching Vanessa Whitmore Palmer receive her sentence. The judge in Arizona spoke in measured tones, his voice carrying clearly through the speakers in Dr. Hoffman's conference room. Richard had arranged for me to attend remotely, understanding that I wasn't yet strong enough to travel back to the States. "Vanessa Marie Whitmore Palmer, this court finds you guilty on all counts. First-degree attempted murder, fraud in the first degree, grand theft, conspiracy to commit murder. On the screen, Vanessa stood in an orange jumpsuit, her designer wardrobe and professional blowouts a distant memory. Her hair hung limp around her face. Her eyes were hollow, defeated. 8 months ago, she had been the princess of Arizona high society. Now she was prisoner number 2847593. For the crime of first-degree attempted murder, I sentence you to 25 years in the Arizona State Women's Prison. For fraud, 15 years to be served concurrently. For grand theft, 10 years, concurrent. For conspiracy, an additional 5 years, consecutive, 30 years. Vanessa would be 61 when she was eligible for parole. The camera angle shifted, and I saw Richard in the gallery. He sat alone, his face expressionless. He had testified against his own daughter, had presented the evidence he had gathered, had watched her attorneys try to discredit him on the stand. He hadn't flinched, not once. After the gala evidence went viral, more victims came forward. Gerald Hoffman's family, a former roommate who had been drugged, a business partner who had been defrauded. The prosecution built an airtight case. The jury deliberated less than 4 hours. As the guards led Vanessa away, she turned and looked directly at the camera, at me. Her expression was pure hatred, concentrated malice that seemed to reach through the screen and wrap around my throat. Hoffman muted the feed. "Are you all right, Betty?" I nodded, though my hands were shaking. "I think I need a moment." She left me alone in the conference room overlooking Lake Zurich. The water sparkled in the late afternoon sun, peaceful and indifferent to the drama playing out across the Atlantic. My phone buzzed. Tyler. "Mom, did you watch?" A long pause. I could hear him breathing, could picture him in his small Phoenix apartment, the one he had rented after selling the house and donating the insurance money to Fabry Research. "I keep thinking I should feel something," he said. "Relief or closure or something, but I just feel empty. That's normal. You were married to her for 5 years. You loved her. Did I? Or did I love the person she pretended to be?" It was a question he had been asking in therapy for months. I didn't have an answer for him. "She'll be in prison for 30 years, Tyler continued. "By the time she gets out, I'll be 64. You'll be—" "I might not be here," I finished. "That's okay, Tyler. You can say it. The treatment is working, but it's not a cure. Hoffman says I could have years left. Maybe even decades if we're lucky. But there are no guarantees." The experimental therapy had exceeded expectations. Within 3 months, my kidney function stabilized. Within 6, the damage began to reverse. The Zurich team was writing papers about my case. Richard had funded all of it. His way of making amends for raising the monster who nearly killed me. "I'm coming to Zurich next week," Tyler said. "I want to see you. I want to talk." We had been rebuilding slowly, carefully. Monthly phone calls that grew into weekly ones. Emails sharing small details of our separate lives. A video call on my birthday, where he had actually made me laugh for the first time in over a year. Trust was harder. Some days I looked at my son and saw the man who had signed papers giving his wife control of my medication, who had taken out life insurance on his dying mother, who had chosen Vanessa over me again and again. Other days, I saw the boy he had been, the man he was trying to become. "Tyler," I said, "there's something I need to tell you. I've been writing about everything that happened, about Vanessa and your father before he died, and the choices I made. A publisher in New York is interested. I'm not going to use real names," I continued, "and I won't publish anything you're not comfortable with, but I think people should know. Not for revenge or vindication, but because there are other women out there being slowly destroyed by people who claim to love them. If my story can help even one of them recognize the signs, you should do it." Tyler's voice was thick. "Tell the truth. All of it. I don't deserve to be protected. I knew something was wrong. For months, I knew. And I chose to look away because it was easier than confronting reality." He took a shaky breath. "If telling your story means telling mine, then do it. Maybe it'll help someone else avoid my mistakes." After we hung up, I sat for a long time watching the light change over the lake. The shadows lengthened. The water shifted from blue to gold to purple. I thought about the night this had all begun. The scorching heat of the Arizona summer, Vanessa's screams, the weight of the vial in my hand, $2 million, 6 weeks of life, the only thing standing between me and death. I had given it up without hesitation, not because I was brave or selfless, but because in that moment, I hadn't been thinking about myself at all. I had seen someone suffering, and I had acted. Vanessa had counted on that. She had used my compassion as a weapon against me, but in the end, that same compassion had saved me. If I had let her die, Richard would never have investigated. I would have slowly deteriorated, never knowing I was being poisoned, never understanding why my medication wasn't working. By saving Vanessa's life, I had saved my own. The irony wasn't lost on me. There was a knock at the door. Hoffman entered with a manila envelope. "Your latest test results." She was smiling. "The protein levels are almost normal. The enzyme replacement is holding." I took the envelope but didn't open it. "How much longer will I need to stay in Zurich?" "Another month, perhaps 2. We want to make sure you're stable before maintenance therapy." She sat down. "Betty, when you came here, you said you'd rather die trying than give up. You've done more than try. Your case is helping develop treatments for thousands of patients." I looked at the envelope. Months of needles and uncertainty. Months of refusing to give up. "I didn't do this to change lives," I said. "I did it because I wasn't ready to die. And do you still have things left to do?" I thought about the book I was writing, about the grandson I might one day meet, about the garden I wanted to plant when I finally went home. "Yes," I said. "I do." That evening, I video called Richard. He answered from his office in Phoenix, looking older than he had 8 months ago. The trial had taken something out of him. "I heard you watched the sentencing," he said. "I did. How are you?" He considered the question. "I thought I would feel vindicated. Instead, I feel like I buried my daughter today." "In a way, you did. She's not dead. She's just gone. The child I raised, the woman I thought she was, she never really existed. I was raising a predator, and I didn't see it until it was too late. You saw it in time to save me." "Did I? Or did I just clean up my own mess?" He ran a hand over his face. "I keep thinking about all the signs I missed. The cruelty, the entitlement, the way she used people and discarded them. I saw it, Betty. I saw all of it. And I told myself it was just ambition, just drive, just a strong personality. You're not responsible for who she became, aren't I?" His laugh was bitter. "I gave her everything. Money, connections, opportunities. I never made her work for anything, never let her face consequences. I created the perfect conditions for a monster to grow. I didn't argue. He was partly right, but he was also partly wrong. Vanessa made choices," I said. "Every day, every moment, she chose cruelty over kindness, manipulation over honesty, destruction over creation. You may have enabled her, but you didn't make those choices for her." Richard was quiet for a long time. "The foundation is establishing a fund in your name," he finally said, "for Fabry disease research. It's not much, not compared to what my daughter took from you, but I want to do something meaningful. You already have. The treatment, the research facility, everything you've funded, that's meaningful. It's still money that will help people. Intent matters less than impact." He almost smiled. "You're very forgiving for someone who was nearly murdered by my daughter." "I'm not forgiving. I'm practical." I leaned closer. "You can spend your life feeling guilty, or you can use your resources to make sure no one else goes through what I went through. And if I can't make up for what she did, you can't. But there is moving forward." Silence stretched between us. "I'm going to start visiting Marcus," Richard said finally. "My son, in London. He's agreed to have dinner with me next month. He hates me. Vanessa poisoned that relationship years ago, but he's willing to try. That's all any of us can do," I said. "Try." After the call ended, I stood at the window and watched the stars emerge over Lake Zurich. The night was clear and cold, so different from the brutal Arizona heat that had started all of this. I had survived. Against all odds, against all expectations, I had survived. Not just the disease, not just the poison, but the betrayal, the manipulation, the systematic destruction of everything I had built. Vanessa had tried to erase me, to reduce me to nothing more than a source of money, an obstacle to be removed. She had nearly succeeded, but in the end, I was still here, still breathing, still fighting, and she was the one who had lost everything. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. Mostly, I felt tired and grateful and determined to make whatever time I had left count for something. The book would be published next year. Tyler would visit next week. The research would continue, and maybe someday there would be a cure that meant no one else would have to make the choice I had made that sweltering August night. I had given up my last vial of hope to save someone who wanted me dead. And somehow, impossibly, that sacrifice had led me here, to a second chance I never expected, to a future I had given up on. The vial was empty, but I was full of something I hadn't felt in years. I was full of possibility.